everyone and welcome to this April Bullet Journal Plan With Me video. My name is Anna and today I'm so excited to walk through this very springy flowers and hedgehogs inspired theme. We're painting a lot today and this theme is kind of a recreation of one of my older ones, but the end result is still quite different. But anyway, that's it for the introductions and we are jumping right into this bigger gouache painting that's going to the cover spread. So I actually created this painting on my separate watercolor sketchbook that's a little bit bigger than my notebook. Since I knew there will be lots of small details in this, I thought that creating it in a bigger size will be a bit easier, and then I'll just scale down the final painting in Photoshop and print out the final version. I know this might look very intimidating, there's kind of a lot going on here, but I promise that seeing the process step by step will make you much more confident and ready to challenge yourself with a more detailed painting like this. But if you're not interested in the painting, I'll leave a timestamp for you when the rest of the setup will start, since we'll be spending a while with this one. But okay, as always, we're starting with a pencil sketch and I focused the sketching part mainly on this top area of the painting where we'll have these old buildings that will require some finer detail than the rest of the painting. I haven't done a bigger, detailed gouache painting like this in a while, but since I had my new shop collection coming, I thought I would create this one for it and also film the whole process for this video. But yeah, when it comes to the rest of the painting, I just lightly sketched out some of the bush shapes and a general idea of what I want to go where. But the good thing about gouache is that you could make a much more detailed pencil sketch too, and it will be covered with the paints. So if you feel like doing that might help you and make you feel more confident, go for it. But then it's time to finally take out the paints and we're starting from probably the least important part of this painting, which is the sky. All these first colors might look a little bit strange at first, but my goal was to keep the colors a little bit muted and more on the bluish mint green side rather than the very yellowish olive greens that I tend to use more often. So yeah, I feel like the base layers can be very hard to get right because you don't really have any other colors here to compare or check the lightness or darkness. I personally feel like all colors tend to look darker when you apply them against the white background of the paper, but once we start to apply some darker shadows and other shades to the picture, these colors will melt together with the rest just fine, and you might even need to darken them even further. I leave the main color names that I'm using on the screen, but the truth is that I was mixing pretty much all these colors on my painting palette. I would consider myself a pretty messy painter, so I just like to use whatever is on my palette and somehow make it work instead of adding fresh paints all the time. The only color that I feel like I need to keep reapplying is a white shade that I use a lot to mix with other colors. But yeah, these first layers do not need to be perfect. We'll keep adding layers upon layers on top of all of this. So once we have some messy background layers everywhere, it's time to pick a corner of the painting where we'll start working with the first detail layers. I think I spent the most time here in this upper part where the buildings and all the plants surrounding them are. I wanted there to be lots of hanging leaves and flowers on these buildings to create this very cozy, wild garden look. And I wanted the rest of the image to have many different kinds of flower bushes as well. I was very inspired by some Studio Ghibli images and tried to go for a little bit similar style with the shadows and highlights in all these bushes and flowers. Something I'm always surprised by is how deep you actually need to go with the shadow parts. I was using pretty much pure black for the darker parts here in this picture, because if you want the medium and lighter tones to show up, the bottom layers need to be very dark. Then when it comes to the actual painting technique, I swear it's just all lines and dots. My hand was literally cramping while painting this, and I had to do it in many different painting sessions because I was just tapping on these small dots and details and different shades on top of each other. I feel like I'm not yet on the level with gouache paints where I could control them perfectly and create very clean, small shapes. So the tapping technique works pretty well for me. It might create a little bit messier outcome, but I don't know if it's always a bad thing. I think I spent something between 7 and 8 hours on this painting in total, so I had to speed up some parts here a little bit. However, I think the technique stayed pretty much the same, so adding lighter details on top of darker background tones and just repeated that a few times. I also had to keep lifting the painting a little bit because the roof in my buildings was completely slanted. Mistakes like that easily happen to me when I'm filming or if I spend a lot of time with a painting and get blind to it. So I think it's a good idea to take a step back and pay attention to the angles and balance. I would advise you to sometimes look at your painting straight from the top so you can notice if there is something weird going on with the dimensions. I think this painting ended up being slightly unbalanced because there was so much more going on the left side, but I don't know if that's something that just bothers me or if you noticed it too. But anyway, after just hours and hours of tapping, painting these different shapes of flowers, and adding texture, highlights, and deeper shadows, the last step was to paint these small hedgehogs that I wanted to add to the lower part. And I actually only started these by hand here and finished all of these on a computer. I know some of you might be thinking that I'm cheating here, but I simply had no time to finish this painting by hand. It's much faster and easier for me to work on a computer, especially for small details like this, and I had to get this painting done for the shop launch, so this is what I had to do. However, I thought you might still be interested to see how I fix small things like this on a computer without disturbing the painted appearance too much. So I use a scanner to scan the images to my computer, and then I always fix some colors and contrast, remove any dust particles or small hairs in the paints, and then I fix some small things that I missed while painting. I think the key is to use some sort of textured brush that will mimic the natural look of your paint strokes. I'll leave the name of the brush collection I have in the description in case you're interested in it. I used these brushes for literally everything I draw digitally. So I made the eyes and nose much smaller than what I was able to do by hand, and then fixed any posture mistakes, added some highlights to these spikes, and also fixed the area around the hedgehogs as well. After all this, they surely look much better than what they initially did, and I also went ahead and added some white glowy sparkles to this image that I love to add to my paintings. But after that, I printed out the correct size of this painting on a matte photo paper, and after that we are finally ready to move our focus to the left side. So I'll first show you these two colored papers that I printed out for this theme, and I'll add both of these to the free section of my shop. I'll link it for you in the description as well, and there are also lots of other color palettes and some textured papers if you want to print them out for yourself or use for a digital journal. But nowadays, whenever I make a more time-consuming painting for these cover spreads, I like to combine it with a monthly calendar, so it feels like we get a little bit more use out of all those extra hours of work. So that's what I did here. I made the calendar from this mint green piece of paper and then glued some dot grid paper on top of it. I get these extra pieces of dot paper either from my old journals or from some previous Dutch door pages I've created. So I usually save all the extra pieces I cut out for opportunities like this. But after the simple calendar was done, I sketched out the April title and some decorations to the top part out of camera to save some time, and then we can start filling them in together with a black pen. I went with this romantic cursive font this month. I leave the name of the font I mostly used as my inspiration to this screen in case you want to look it up. And then I went ahead and drew these small flower leaf decorations as well. I recommend using a very thin pen for decorations like this. It helps to keep them looking more delicate and defined. And then if you want, you can color them with whatever technique you prefer. I went with watercolors this time, but brush pens, gouache paints, or colored pencils would work perfectly too. But after that, that's finally it for the whole cover and calendar combination spread, and we can finally move on to some more planning focused pages. However, before we do that, I want to take just a quick moment to advertise my own shop a little bit. So the new spring collection is finally out, and it's very much in line with this monthly theme. There are stickers, washi tapes, paper patterns, and some other stuff too that you can either get separately or in a collection box that saves you some money and gets you a few exclusive items. And if you're a person who prefers a more neutral aesthetic, I also have a basics collection with many neutral journaling and scrapbooking staples. But that's it for the advertisement. Thank you for sitting through that. And now let's get started with the next planning spread. So this will be a combined second quarter and April planning spread, and we are starting by lining all the outlines of this spread with this mint green paper again. However, I thought we needed a small break from the decorations, so after gluing the borders, we'll fill the inner space here first, and then do the decorations last. So April will start the second quarter of the year, and whenever I remember, I try to include a short quarter planning section in my bullet journal themes. I feel like dividing the year into these 3-month time frames is such a good idea in terms of goals or any challenges or new things you want to achieve. I always try to tie these into my yearly goals because I'm kinda intense about those, but it doesn't even need to be anything big. For example, you could challenge yourself to start that new hobby you've been thinking about, maybe fix your sleeping rhythm, start a new exercise routine, or whatever it is you want to focus and spend a little bit more time on. I think the 3-month period is so much more realistic for anything like this because sometimes life happens and 1 month is gone before you even realized it. So something I try to live by is to set yourself up for a win by setting the goal very, very low. Then on the right page, I wanted to also set a small section just for April specifically. And I tried out this new layout where I can write what I want to do, then what I can forget for now, and also what I want to try this month. Then at the bottom, I added this small accountability thing where I can circle whether I kept up with these plans in April or not. I wasn't sure what I wanted to use the top part of the second page for yet, so at this point I thought we could jump to the border decorations. I started here with this frame around the middle section because I wanted there to be a clear divider between it and the border. I wanted to create some sort of flower pattern here, and I thought it might all get a little bit too busy if there isn't a good divider. Again, I kind of skipped the pencil sketch here because you can basically see me draw the pattern when we go over it with the black pen. I wanted here to be some bigger and smaller leaves, and then these crisscross vines, some very simple flowers, and then I just repeated the same thing across the whole border. To be honest, this pattern didn't end up being my favorite in this theme. It's one of those ones that look okay when you see it from afar, but not that much if you look at it too closely. I do think that adding some white accents really helped here and made everything a little bit lighter. And then I decided to add some color to these small leaves as well. I felt like this pattern would have needed some light pink or peach shade, but there wasn't really anything to use that color for in the pattern, and adding a light pink color on top of this turquoise background wouldn't have really worked either. So I decided to just let it go and move on to the final details of this spread. I thought we should have at least one hedgehog drawing on this spread as well, so I started to draw it to this small empty space I left here in the corner. Again, we're gonna start from a pencil sketch as always. I also sketch other stuff in my journal too. I just don't usually show that part in the videos. I've tried to set up spreads in the past without making a pencil sketch, and they just never turn out well. So even after, 5 years of bullet journaling later, I still think that making a rough pencil sketch is the best way to go, at least if you have time for it. But anyway, we're then intensifying the outlines with the same thin black pen again. I think hedgehogs are actually pretty straightforward to draw, at least if you go for a more cartoony, cute style like I tried to go for here. The coloring is pretty simple, and really the most difficult part is probably the face. So you could try to play with the height, distance and size of the nose and the eyes and see what kind of difference that makes. Black round eyes like this usually create a pretty cute appearance in my opinion, and then I always like to leave a small white highlight dot in the eyes. I wanted to keep the flowers and leaves here very simple, so we are just barely adding any color to them. And then the very last thing on this spread was this empty section on the second page. I initially thought about adding another drawing here, but this spread already had kinda a lot going on, so instead I made this 2023 goals check-in box where you just write short notes of how the things you decided at the beginning of the year are going, and if there's something you could maybe spend a little bit more attention to. But yeah, here we have the whole planning spread done, and then it's time to move on to the weekly setup of April, which probably ended up being my own personal favorite from this theme. So we are starting by adding these 2 vertical papers on the sides of the whole weekly section, and then we're gonna cut a half circle border for 2 spreads here in the middle. So I first rounded the corners and then attached these 2 pages together with a washi tape so that they would stay in place while we cut both of them together. We're gonna draw some flower patterns to the edge papers again, but before that, let's first set up the pages in the middle. I only needed 4 pages for the weeks in April, so that leaves the first and last page here as an extra space that we can use for whatever we want. So I started by making this headspace section where I can just write about my feelings and thoughts on the first and then on the last day of April. March has been a very busy month for me. I've been a little bit stressed out lately, so my goal is to make April a little bit more relaxed and a month for me where I can breathe, refocus and get back to my regular routine without some extra stuff going on. So I wanted this whole weekly section to kind of represent those feelings a little bit, and I hope I'll notice some relaxation happening between the first and the last days of this month. But then the second page here will be for the first week in April, and my weekly pages always look pretty similar. I have a little bit of room here for each day to write a few tasks or any deadlines or events I need to remember. And then I have these 2 sections on the left side for any important tasks and things I need to remember. And then just some empty space for writing any random notes I might have throughout the month. So very simple, but this is truly a layout that works so well for me and is also very quick to set up. This year, I've also been decorating the weekly pages a little bit with some washi tapes and stickers out of the camera, which I'll probably do this time too. And you can see how everything turned out in the flip through videos I film every month. But then I decided to use the last page here for a habit tracker. So the symbols at the top are the habits I'm currently tracking, and the numbers on this side are the dates. But after that we can jump to the decorations, and we're following pretty much the same steps as in the previous drawings. This time I went with a little bit different leaf and flower shapes. I tried to keep these very delicate again, and I think the combination of using a very thin pen and also not drawing all the lines fully helps to create that very gentle appearance. Then the flowers this time are just a circle of small scribbles. I think this mimics some sort of rose shape, but again, no need to draw anything super detailed. I added some dots and scribbles to the leaves to create a bit of texture in them, but otherwise we're again just gonna add a light layer of color here, and especially when it comes to the leaves, I tried to keep the color pretty grayish and light. Then to add to the whole refocus theme here, I wanted to finish these both sides with a quote. So the first one here says, "Unplug your mind, recharge your soul." And the second one that goes to the last page says, "Take a deep breath, smile, and start again." But after the floral patterns are done, it finishes this weekly section. I really like how this turned out and how the half circle border suits the flower pattern. But anyway, I'll set the rest of the weeks later, so now we can flip ourselves to the last spread of this whole layout, which is of course the April reflection spread. So this is something I always like to end my monthly layouts with, and I will also fill this spread at the very end of April just to look back and reflect on what happened and how I'm doing. So we are starting from a cursive title here again, which I decided to write on this mint green shape. And after that, the first thing here is this scale thing, where I'll write a few different areas of my life that I'll grade the previous month from 1 to 10 with. I think these are very interesting sections to look back to and compare if you end up doing this a few months in a row. But then the rest of the spread is pretty simple, so I usually like to have some open space to write about whatever is on my mind at the moment. And then I started the next page with a gratefulness section that I feel is always very important to include. And then the last section is a little bit more fun, so here I list all my favorite things from April. We'll finish this spread with one more flower hedgehog doodle here at the bottom of the spread, and I speeded this one a little bit again, especially when it comes to the flowers, because I think you saw me drawing quite a few flowers in this video already. And again, I decided to use watercolors here for a very quick and simple layer of color. But when that's done, it finally wraps up this April monthly theme. The cover painting was definitely the most time-consuming piece this month, but otherwise I hope you also enjoyed these a bit simpler pages and got many new ideas for your own journals. If this was your first time around here and you'd like to stay tuned for more journaling and art stuff, please consider subscribing. And I think that's it for this time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye.